3D Christmas Minion Acrylic Nail Art Tutorial by Hotpinkzebrapolish. So I'm going to start by making the tail of the hat on a nail form backing. So you just want to taper both ends, and it's almost a boomerang shape, or that, think of it kind of that way. And then with red acrylic, and I'm keeping that fairly thin, and then adding a very firm bead. So take all the liquid out of the back of your brush. I'm adding a gold bead on the end of it, and then using a nail tip, I'm just going to make a little indent for the bottom of the bell. On my nail tip, I'm going to create the top of the hat with red acrylic, and I'm going to make the bottom of it, that edge, going to be at an angle going down towards where you're going to put that tail. So you want the thicker part where the tail is going to be. And then fill in the rest of the tip with yellow. And I know in this clip I did not go all the way down to the end. You probably should, and I did later on. I don't know why, I just stopped. I don't know, sometimes, I do weird things. But go all the way down to the end of the nail. So then with red acrylic, you're going to be gluing on the tail of that hat once both pieces have fully set. So just place down a wet bead and then hold it on there until it is set. And then with another bead of red acrylic, you're going to probably need to blend the edge together so it doesn't have any lumps or bumps, so it's nice and smooth. And then I'm going to further mask that connection with a bead of clear acrylic that I then dipped into red glitter. Oh my goodness, I can't speak. Clear acrylic that I dipped into red glitter, and I'm going to spread that over the top of the entire hat. Well, at least all the red of the hat. I'm not going over the bell. You see what I mean. Alright, so now I'm going to be placing a silver bead right in the center of where I want my minion's face to be. And then using the point of my brush, I'm going to be pulling and stretching that out into a nice circle for his goggle. So now I'm going to cover that seam between the hat and the minion's head with a band of white acrylic. And I don't really need this to be super smooth. It can be a little uneven looking, thicker in some places, thinner. It's the fur part of the hat, so it can be a little crazy looking. That's fine. So then also on the nail form backing, I'm going to be sculpting 2 yellow arms. So I'm going to make L shapes, and you need one L to be forwards and one to be backwards if you're making part of the arm thicker and part of it thinner. So if they're not completely, each section of the arm isn't identical, which it doesn't have to be or doesn't necessarily need to be, then you need to make sure you go one in each direction. And also on a nail form backing, I'm going to be placing down a bead of green, and then I'm going to pull that into a circle just like we did with the goggle. This is going to be for the wreath. And then once I got that into the circle form that I'm going for, I'm going to just poke it with the tip of my brush to make the surface a little uneven and a little bit wreath-like. So then with little beads of clear and red acrylic, so clear acrylic dipped in red glitter, I'm going to add some berries onto my wreath. Alright, I'm going to make a red bow that is going to go on top of my wreath later on. So I'm going to start by making 2 petal shapes. So place down a bead and then pull it out and press the back of it until you get basically a petal or a teardrop shape. And I'm going to be making 2 of those, one for each side of the bow. And at this point, they don't have to be touching each other, because later on you can pick one up and move it over and then connect the 2 with a bead of red acrylic. And I'm going to be adding a gold stud in the center of my bow. On your minion, I'm going to now be adding his overalls. So with a relatively small bead of blue acrylic, I'm going to be sculpting that top square part of his overalls. And so you want to make sure this doesn't go up too high, or you're not going to have room to paint his mouth. But then after you got that square down, fill in the rest of the tip going straight and making nice square angles with blue acrylic. Like so. And as you could see, I filled in the rest of my tip with yellow right before this part. Again, I don't know why I didn't before. Glue on your wreath with some clear acrylic. And now I'm going to be adding his arms. So I'm going to start by putting down a thin bead of yellow acrylic where his arm is going to be, and then placing that arm, making sure that it fits correctly. And then I'm going to be holding it there in place until it sets. And then with another bead, I'm going to be blending that in, just like you did with the hat. And so then you're going to need to give him hands, and so his hands need to be attached and holding the wreath. So you might need to do some interesting balancing acts here with that bead of black acrylic, and you want to make sure it's nice and firm so that it doesn't run all over the place and it goes where you want it to go. And then with a thin bead of blue acrylic, you're going to need to add the straps of his overall, just like so. And now I'm going to be adding that bow onto the wreath. You could add the bow on anytime you wanted. I don't know, it didn't seem important until now, so I didn't add it on until then. And then over that band of white on the hat, cover that with nail glue and then place flocking powder on top of it while it is still wet. I'm going to first tap off the excess and let it dry just a second. And then with just a fan brush, I'm going to be brushing off any of that flocking powder that has gotten pretty much everywhere, as it will. So just brush it off the rest of your minion. So now I'm going to be doing some painting with acrylic paint, and the first thing I'll do is fill in the goggle with white. And now with yellow, I'm going to be adding upper and lower eyelids. And also with yellow paint, I'm going to be touching up a little bit where that blue of the overall strap bled onto my minion's skin, I guess. And then add the color in his eye with blue. You can use any color you want. But usually the minions have blue, brown, or green eyes, just like people. And then add the strap of his goggle. And then I'm also just going to do a little bit of outlining in his eye. I'm not doing outlining anywhere else, but because of the way the eye is, I thought it looked a lot better to do some outlining just to make it nice and crisp looking. And of course add a smile and his pupil, and then also outline those crevices you made in the hat. Highlight the strap of his goggle with 2 gray stripes and the gloves with 1. Cover your minion's body and overalls and all that with some matte top coat. And then with glossy top coat, I'm going to be filling in his eye, going over the wreath and over his hat. And as you're doing this, make sure that you do not get top coat over the flocking powder or you're going to lose that fuzzy feel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you like this design and tutorial. Please share any recreations with me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I would really love to see them. I'm sure they will look fantastic, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!